Jupiter Broadcasting presents this program in stereo. This episode brought to you by GoDaddy.com.
This week on the Linux Action Show, it's our beginner's action guide to Linux. We've collected some of our top audience questions, and we give you the straight answers to your hard-hitting questions. Plus, we've got 3 wicked Android picks that will empower your handset with super phone-like abilities fueled by our yellow sun. And so much more. Oh, this week on the Linux Action Show. And welcome to Season 13, Episode 6 of the Linux Action Show. My name is Brian. With me is Chris.
Hey there, Brian.
Hi there, Chris.
The Samsung Galaxy Tab runs Linux.
Yeah, it does. And it looks nice, too.
It looks pretty good, doesn't it?
It looks great. It looks like what I'd want a small tablet to look like if the screen weren't only 7 inches in size.
The 7 inches in size, I don't know if it's going to be too bad because they're still going to be pairing that with a 1024 by 600 display.
That does help.
And what looks cool about it is it looks like that means you can actually just grip it with a single hand, right?
Ooh,
the iPad's more of like you hold it with one hand, but it's just it gets a little heavy.
Yeah.
And
I do like the look of this. What I really want, though, is I want a 9-inch version of this.
I could see that.
Or even a 10-inch version of this with even similar resolution.
I think it's likely.
But I'm kind of a unique guy in that regard. I want it for comic book reading. That's what I want it for.
Yeah.
And everything else is almost just secondary for me.
But to be honest with you, I think you're likely going to see that because it sounds like Samsung's planning to put out a bunch of different SKUs of this unit. This is the first one. And, honestly, I'm going to hold my breath. I haven't yet seen Android on a resolution that high, so I don't know how it's going to, I don't know. I'm looking at they're going to ship it with, the 1024 by 600, but also it's going to include a gigahertz processor, Android 2.2, and a GSM modem in there for 3G. And you're going to have a 4,000 milliamp battery. Now, to give you an example, a 4,000 milliamp, this Evo 4G, my stock is a 1,300 or 1,400 milliamp, and I think the extended I just put in here is a 2,000 milliamp.
Okay, now what does that translate to in terms of hours of actual use time?
So on this guy, I went from I'd say 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. and I need to charge it. And
that's active use?
With probably 11 to 15 phone calls in that period, and then
that's pretty decent.
A lot of text messaging. But now with this new battery. I'm going into the next day, and that's including when I took this down to PAX. By the time I got home, even after PAX, which is hard on a phone, on a big convention.
PAX is hard on a phone.
Yeah, but down there, I came home with half battery.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that ain't bad.
So
we're looking at something that could have pretty awesome battery life.
Yeah, it's going to have GPS in it too, and it's going to have a front-facing camera, which will be nice.
Man.
So you can do some video chat and stuff like that.
And theoretically, so I mean, we've got video chatting on Skype on Android now. It's just it's only available on Verizon.
Yeah.
So theoretically, someday Skype will make that available to everybody, and then we'll all rejoice.
There's also
it'll be great.
There's also Fring, I think it's called.
Yeah, but what is the deal with? Excuse me, my knee was itching. What is the deal with companies like Skype? Only releasing an Android app for a specific carrier?
Oh, I know. Well,
I don't know if I understand that.
They cut a deal with Verizon. Is what it is.
Did Verizon help fund it?
Yeah, Verizon paid them.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Dude,
I know.
That's pretty smart on Verizon's part, but
they force it.
It sucks.
It's not just locked to Verizon. They force it over Verizon's 3G.
Really? So you can't do Wi-Fi?
They just revved it so it doesn't disable your Wi-Fi while it's running.
But it can't. It doesn't run over Wi-Fi?
No.
Why not?
Because they want you to have
use
to pay
Verizon's 3G and use.
Mm-hmm.
That is so sneaky.
Sucks.
I'm not a big fan of that.
No.
Man, see, this is a good example of why you get one of those little MiFi or wireless 3G to Wi-Fi router things, and just keep it in your pocket and turn it on all the time so that you get testicular cancer.
Well, I think it's likely
that you always have Wi-Fi.
The new Google Talk stuff or the new Google Voice stuff in Gmail is based off Gizmo, which used SIP. And this is the problem with Skype, and this is a good topic because this is a very noob edition of the Linux Action Show. and we're really going to be covering beginners basics. And one of the things you'll hear a lot about is open source and open standards and open protocols. Well, SIP is an open protocol for voice communication over the internet. Skype's is a proprietary protocol, which means only Skype has the ownership to that, which means Skype can then exclusively sell rights to Verizon. Whereas the Gizmo project and now the Google Voice technology in Gmail is using SIP, an open source protocol, or at least an open standards protocol. It's likely that somebody could just implement a client for that.
Yeah.
And then right over Wi-Fi on Android.
Awesome.
Hey, you know what? Speaking of Android, I do have some picks.
What do you got?
Well, why don't we say hello to GoDaddy first?
That's what I was gonna do, and then you were like, "No,
I know.
no, Brian.
I changed it
Let's
up on
talk
you.
about the Android pick."
Because I realized
and
what
then you looked
to
at
do.
me and you're like, "Oh, I just screwed with him. Now I'm gonna let him do his thing." All right. Well, you know what? This episode of Linux Action Show is sponsored by GoDaddy.com, the world's largest web hosting domain name registrar. If you're ready to make an impact online, GoDaddy.com has got you covered. Domain names as low as $1.99 plus world-class hosting, unlimited disk space with bandwidth, do-it-yourself website builders, dedicated certificates, servers, SSLs, internets, telephony, not telephony, logging, Linux, command lines, also servers, much more. Plus a Linux Action Show viewer or listener, enter promo code Linux. That's LINUX, and save an additional 10% off of your entire order, or enter Linux 20 and save 20% off dedicated hosting. That's fantastic. I just did that.
I want to say thanks to GoDaddy for sponsoring the show. You know what, actually, too, is they have an advanced DNS manager, which is not too shabby. Our site was down last week. Or wait, yeah, when this comes out, I guess it's technically last week.
It was yesterday.
Yeah, it's confusing on a Sunday, Brian. And you can go in here, and if you could have like a really, really low cost, seriously, like some of these are like $4 a month splash page that you could redirect people to while your site's down. I was thinking, and I could spin that up off of one of my virtual hosts we have at GoDaddy.
Not instantly, almost.
So I think if we do a server migration or an upgrade, I might actually use something like that with the GoDaddy Advanced DNS Manager and a GoDaddy host to just be like, sorry, Jupiter Broadcasting's down, and maybe with a couple of static links to our latest episodes.
That'd be great.
Yeah. So why don't
here's your Android pick.
we talk about some Android picks? I actually have three, but the first main Android pick is the AppBrain Market app.
Nice.
Now, this is a little different than Google's because it works in a more of a recommendation system that kind of pulls from the collective community over at the appbrain.com website. And it's a pretty nice app, and if you pair it with a separate app from them called the Fast Web Installer, you can then use AppBrain's website to, I like this app, click a button, and if you have Fast Web Installer installed on your Android phone, it'll automatically push that application to your Android phone and install it.
I like that a lot.
Yeah. And then one last just kind of bonus pick is you've probably heard a lot about this on the Android phones, on the iPhone and on the iPad. But Angry Birds is now out on the Android marketplace, and while you'll be able to find the paid version when you search for Angry Birds, I also thought I might link you to a free version just so you can kind of see what all the buzz is about.
Yep.
It's like it's a light version, so probably only like one level or two. It looks like a couple levels.
Related note: the Angry Birds game, I believe, was on Maemo first.
No kidding.
Yeah, it was.
Or was it just ported to? Oh, it was just ported to the WebOS.
Yeah, it was on the N900 in the little Nokia store they had for like ever. Long before I'd ever heard about
the chat room's
it on anything else.
Chat room's with you, dude.
Yeah, I mean, which is pretty cool. Like it was like the game.
So I'm sure it'll be out on Amigo too
for the N900 people. Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
it's totally rad.
That's cool. All right, Brian, let's get into the noob segment.
Let's do the noobs.
I like that.
Yeah. All right, so as we mentioned earlier, we're going to have a bit of a noob segment here.
Yeah.
We've never really done this before.
No, and part of it is because by the time we started Linux Action Show, we were pretty far down the enthusiast path, and it's kind of hard sometimes for us to remember what some of the early questions were.
It was a long time ago. I mean, when I was a Linux noob, it was Red Hat, -4.
Yeah.
And, honestly, back then, Linux sucked pretty bad. I mean, it was cool. It was really cool.
It has gotten a lot easier, too.
But it was like KDE, earlier versions of KDE.
Yeah.
The UI was very much, still trying its best to copy
very
Windows
early.
95.
Yeah.
And, it was just kind of trying to get some of that stuff going. And a lot of stuff really didn't work.
Yeah.
The Office suites weren't really working right.
Oh, man. Remember, before OpenOffice, before Sun had took StarOffice and open sourced it, we had really nothing.
Dude, what we had was AbiWord.
Yeah.
So AbiWord, and at that point, AbiWord was not good.
Right.
Like AbiWord was a little janky itself, and so we were left adrift. So it forced users back then to become pro users,
Yeah.
even if they weren't ready for it.
Yeah, you had
You
to.
know,
You
if
had to do
wanted
the
to be
research and
Linux,
all that stuff. It
you
does.
had to go all out.
You know, and I think I've seen an uptick in the amount of questions we've gotten about some of the newcomers to Linux. And I think. I think some of the other shows on Jupiter Broadcasting, people are like, "Oh, I like that show. I'll watch the Linux Action Show just to give it a shot." And they're like, "Oh, this is interesting, but I don't know what they're talking about." I've been hearing that more and more.
So here we go. We got a big list of questions here. Now, if you're a pro user, you're gonna go, "Oh my god, what are they asking us?" And they're gonna roll your eyes. But just bear with us for a
Yeah,
little bit.
and you know what? Maybe we should say up front, if you're a pro user and if we stumble over a question that you just I think our answer is atrocious, head over to jupitercolony.com and go to the Linux Action Show segment. And there's a thread in there for this episode, and I'm going to ask that if you're a new user and you want to absorb some Linux information, go there
and ask questions. Feel free. I mean, one of the best things about using Linux is the community. Not just the community, the many communities.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have a particular style, a particular taste, a way you like to communicate, there will be a community for you.
Yeah, you do have to kind of maybe hone in on the culture of some of the communities. Like, there's some forums where you'll go and you'll find that they don't necessarily respond well to your questions, and sometimes that's because you have to follow some etiquette. It's a community and a culture. It really is that. It's kind of like going into a clubhouse.
You can't just wander through the front door and start going, "Where's the bathroom? Where's the bathroom?"
Yeah,
you actually have
search for it.
You have to buy a drink.
Yeah,
and you have to say
participate.
Oh, hey everybody! Oh, there's the dance floor. That's nice. Oh, bathrooms are in the back. Right? Yeah. Okay. There we go.
Yeah.
And then everyone thinks you're awesome.
And check to make sure. Like a lot of times, you'll get instantly people mad at you if you ask a question and there's like there's already a thread that has asked that question with answers.
Yeah, searching in the forums is big. Otherwise, you're going to get people all cranky. Some people will be a little cooler about it, but just be aware.
Like Jupiter Colony, we're pretty cool about that stuff.
We're not going to jump all over you.
No.
We're awesome.
All right, so let's jump into some of the more common questions we've gotten. This is a combination of some awesome questions from our live chat room. We do the Linux Action Show live over at jupiterbroadcasting.com/live, 10 a.m. Pacific. That's right now.
Right now.
GMT -8.
Negative 8:30
on Sundays.
No.
Well, we do it
negative 8.
-8.
It's 10:30 right now.
At 10 a.m. we do the show live, though.
Gosh, math is hard.
I know. You've got PAX brain. We should
I
say
have PAX brain.
we're
right
doing
now.
a shorter episode this week because it's a PAX weekend for us.
So it's 10:30 in the morning. I was out until about 2:30 last night, rocking it out at the Penny Arcade Expo down in Seattle, and by which has nothing to do with Linux. There's no Linux related anything.
We
there.
really
it's just
searched
video games.
high and low to try to get some really good nuggets for the Linux Action
There's
Show.
a couple of games that run on Linux.
Yeah, and
I've got review copies coming.
And there's a couple of games that are based off open source engines.
Yep.
But they
and
don't really talk about that.
And there's at least one or two games, one I'm thinking of, that has the same name as an open source game. So
Next US.
we'll talk about that later.
Yeah. Once we're going to actually go down and get a demonstration of it later today.
No. We're going to a party.
Oh, it's a party.
It's a party, dude.
That's awesome.
It's an after party. The next US guys are throwing an after party.
And the Linux Action Show is going to be there.
Oh, yeah. And we will represent Worry You Not. All right, so let's get into these questions.
Okay. So the first one,
we got a stack of books here.
Yeah.
I should.
Do you want to comment on books versus like research? Because I got a couple of different angles. I got do's and don'ts with books.
You know, I'm
not a book guy.
Oh, here's the thing. I'm a bookie. I like books. I like paper. Ebooks are great. I read a ton, but I prefer physical books. I like to read through them for tomes and manuals.
Yeah.
I have shelves upon shelves of programming books and nerd books at home. I've read about a tiny fraction of them. I skim a few of them and everything like that. But here's the thing.
We got 5 books here I've probably read.
When you're
100 pages out of all.
When you're picking up a new operating system and you're really genuinely confused, maybe this isn't a bad way to go. But really, you're just going to read through the first couple chapters, and then from there, you're going to go off on your own merry way, and you're going to ask questions in forums, and you're going to search around on
it's gonna
the
get your brain
Googles
sparked.
and the Bings and the whatnots.
And
that's all you need.
I would say books like things for certifications, not a bad way to go, like Linux Plus here, and books about Linux or components of Linux, like a Samba book.
That's not bad.
They're not bad. I would say books about a specific distribution, like this Ubuntu book I have here. This isn't a good way to go.
No,
because anything that's here's a perfect example. This book is based on Ubuntu 6.10. right?
Yeah,
Well, we're on 9.10 now.
And it's
yeah.
so unrelevant now.
Exactly.
I mean, hell, if you look at the screenshots, you just go,
Yeah.
that is a totally different operating system with different features.
Now, whereas
There's
the
just a different
Samba
thing
book
there.
still has a lot of, it's so much so that I've bookmarked a couple of pages for like domain management and
Yep.
stuff like that.
It's still relevant.
There's still a lot more. Oh, hey, that's when we went and saw Superman Returns at the IMAX in 3D. Remember that?
Dude, that was a long time ago.
Yeah.
Wow.
That was a long time ago, 2006.
Holy moly.
So that's, so I'm just going to, let's just start there with books.
So that was the last time you cracked that one open.
I guess so, yeah.
Yeah,
Now,
so books are interesting, but come on, I mean, go online. It's the easier way to go.
before we jump into it, open source.
Okay.
What is open source? Now, Brian, why don't you take that one, being a developer yourself?
Open source is the source being open.
Yeah, meaning you can look
Meaning
at
you
it,
can get it.
and there's different ways it could be licensed.
There's a million different ways it could be licensed.
Open source doesn't necessarily mean you can do anything you want with it in any way.
No, but having the source available gives you more freedom and more flexibility. And that flexibility may simply be that your IT department can audit the source code for a project
Yep.
for potential security flaws. And that
Which
may be
is
all that
handy.
you can do. But
very good.
having the source code available is kind of an underlying root of Linux, in that the Linux kernel itself is released under the GPL license, which is kind of one of the most pervasive of all the open source licenses, and therefore most of the Linux projects are actually based on that license as well. In fact, the Free Software Foundation likes to lay claim that most of the OS that's out there is really theirs, because, well, it's all GNU'd utilities and GPL'd projects, and well, they originated that, so it's really GNU/Linux as an operating system,
Right.
Which is whiny. It's very whiny of them.
Now, it's
but that's just an overview there.
In the grand scope of things, it does mean that everything from the actual nuts and bolts of the operating system, the really core level stuff that involves like interacting with your hardware devices, all the way up to your text editor, if you were so inclined, you could look at the source code. And if you're a noob, like, that's not always that great of probably of a sell, unless maybe you want to learn a little bit of programming.
Right.
You almost essentially have your entire operating system as a guide.
Right. It's kind of handy.
That's pretty neat.
I mean, that's just very cool.
Now, should we move on to, so why is Linux, how can it possibly be free? If it's free, it must be ass.
It's not free. See, that's the thing. There's no such thing as a free lunch. If you grab a copy of Ubuntu, it doesn't cost you anything. It costs other people some things. There's actually a large company, Canonical, behind Ubuntu that invests a lot of money into just simply putting it together. And here's the thing.
Some projects, like Debian, don't have necessarily one commercial entity behind them. Some of the people might be employed.
They have mega numbers of commercial entities.
Right. But it's not where some distributions like Ubuntu are owned solely by Canonical.
Right.
And some distributions like Debian
are
are
community-driven projects.
But those people in the community may be hired by IBM, by Intel,
Right.
all these different people that are paying their
part of-
paychecks.
and part of their job is to either half-time, full-time, part-time, what have you, to maintain a package or a specific set of packages for that project.
For example, Dell works a lot with the Linux kernel on a lot of the block device drivers, that's your hard drives and networking storage and things like that, because it's in Dell's best interest that Linux run really great on their server.
It
So
makes
they
sense.
pay somebody to do that stuff full time.
Yep. Or and Novell hires a lot of people to work on a lot of different technologies, because those are the technologies that they need to bundle into their enterprise desktop Linux offerings, which they sell, because there's a lot of extra on services that come on top of that.
Yep.
So Linux isn't really free. It just doesn't cost any money to you for the most part to go grab and use it.
Yeah, and there are always pay options, but for
Right.
the most part, that's how it works out. And that does mean really good things for the end user. It means for us,
It's
the cost
cheaper.
is,
Yeah.
other than our time.
Here's the great thing about it. Even though obviously the companies are paying for it in a certain way, it means that it's free enough for you that you can bounce between different versions of Linux and try them all out however you want.
Yeah, think about this. Think
That's
about
kinda cool.
if there was genuine application differences between Windows 7 Home, Windows 7 Enterprise, and Windows 7
You'd have
whatever.
to buy all three of them
Exactly.
just to see what the differences are and see if you like
But
one
if
of them.
OpenSUSE is doing something different than Fedora, and Fedora is doing something different than
try it
Mandriva,
out.
you just jump around.
Yeah.
Jump around.
Just try it out. And heck, with virtualization now, with VirtualBox and VMware Player and all these other free virtualization tools, and the fact that you can grab pre-made virtualized images of them. Just download them. You don't even have to install them. You just
don't
download
want to,
one
yeah.
file, run it. You're like, I don't like that OS. To the trash, and you move right on.
I want to talk about...
I to the trash OSs so often.
That is nice. Oh, this one's
Yeah.
garbage.
Don't
Remove.
like this release at all.
Remove, include disks with removal.
Yeah. Fedora down.
Oh! No, come on now.
It was just an example.
Hey, did you see the Fedora projects redoing their website, speaking of that?
I did.
Now, I want to talk about something that we get a ton of confusion on. Like, people are... And this is one of the things that, honestly, is a damn shame. Root. Okay. Root can mean a couple of different things. Root can be a user account.
Yep.
Root can also be the top of a file system.
Right.
And you hear often the term thrown around, don't run as root.
Right.
Are they talking about the file system? Are they talking about the user? That's probably a common question that I've gotten on YouTube like a jillion times. And I would say they're two different things. Prepare yourself for this. So root is it is the number 0 user. It is the main user in your system. It can do everything. It can literally delete the file system while your operating system is running.
Yeah, it's a great user in that regard.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. So people say don't run as root. I always run as root.
Do you really always run as root?
Hell yes. You know why I run as root?
Why?
Awesome.
Here,
I live on the edge. I'm like Mad Max.
Do you really
for
always
my own
run as root for
desktop
real?
Computer. No, I don't run as root. Are you kidding me? That's asinine. I would love to think that I am so hardcore that I just always run as root. I just caution to the wind. Screw it. Let's just Thunderdome this bitch and see what happens. But no, never run as root. Never ever do that. When you run as the only times you run as a root is you run as root temporarily.
Yeah.
You sudo.
You need to do something.
And basically what sudo is just what it sounds like. You basically pretend to be someone else for a little while. You say system, I'm totally root. I'm not joshing with you. No, me, user 2765.
I'm totally okay to do this.
I'm root. I can do whatever I want.
Yeah.
So you sudo, which by the way is spelled wrong. It's sudo in the system. I don't know why. Do you know why?
Well, I think it was
Instead of ps.
because originally, and still some distros do this, you would just do su.
Right.
So su would just convert you up to root.
That's super user.
Yeah, it would escalate you up to root.
Now is sudo super user do?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. There you go. You put it together.
Oh.
And it's neat.
Let's figure that out.
Sudo's
I always
a good way to do it.
pseudo, since it was pseudo, meant as in.
If you're familiar with Vista or Windows 7, when you get that UAC prompt, that boop, are you sure you would like to do this?
Oh,
And
chat
then
room
you
saying
yes.
no, it's not super user do, it's switch user and do. That's
Oh,
true, because
okay.
you can sudo into any user. So you basically
right, you can.
sudo
You can
space,
SU to any user too, though.
do your user name and then run your
So that
command.
UAC prompt in Windows 7 and Vista is sort of an equivalent
It's a sudo.
of a sudo.
It's sudo root. It's sudo root. Do you want to repeatedly just copy a file?
Now, why you don't want to run as root is you could accidentally do
I
something.
love the chat room. We go around here being retarded, and they're like,
Let's correct
guys,
this.
we
I know.
love you and
I
everything,
know.
but
Yeah.
a giant page of you're wrong.
You know,
Awesome.
I'll tell you, I just remembered this. I literally deleted my file system as an early Linux noob, like Red Hat 6 days. I actually was always running as root, and they didn't really push it as a big of a deal back then.
Yeah.
And I actually, while the system is running, deleted my file system. Interesting, does not go as dramatically bad as you might think. Because of the memory caching in Linux, and the kernel loaded all of the drivers into memory and all of the user applications, I had errors. Like if I didn't have my file manager open, I went to double click on my file manager to say, did I actually really just delete my directory? My file manager wouldn't load, or ls wouldn't execute. But
Oops.
anything that was actually already running still ran fine. So don't run as root, because you might do something like that. But also these days, kids, there's a lot of baddies on the internet, and whatever you download on the internet is going to run at whatever user level you're running at. So if you're running as root, that bad malware, that bad script will
Get
also
to
be running as
everything.
root.
It can touch your whole system.
Now, obviously, not as big of a deal on Linux,
No.
but it's something to think of because it could always happen.
Absolutely. So just don't run as root. Don't do that.
Yeah.
Don't Mad Max it. Don't do what Brian was saying earlier. Don't Thunderdome that.
Don't run with
And,
root.
Don't run with root unless you're like using a tutorial from like our website or Ubuntu.com's forum or something that says in order to install this you got to
Yeah,
sudo.
for privileges. Now,
Right.
last week we covered the news story that the Grub2 bootloader was getting nuked by some Windows DRM applications and things like that.
Yep.
Well, that prompted the question, what's a bootloader?
What's a bootloader? Please. All right, so a bootloader is something that you never should ever have to see or deal with. A bootloader
Ubuntu uses grub.
So your system starts out. Your system gets kickstarted, right? Your hard drive spin up. Your BIOS posts its little doohickey. By that, it goes beep.
Yep.
And you move on. Well, what happens? How does your system know what to do then? So it starts booting.
And it can only execute a very small amount of code.
A very small amount. So what happens is basically it checks the whatever the boot device is. Let's say it's your hard drive at this point.
Right.
Basically hits that and says, okay, go hard drive, go. And well, of course, it can't just say, oh, hey, hard drive. Well, I just magically know that you want to load Linux off of the third partition over here. So just go and do that real quick.
Yeah.
No, it's just going to say, go, blast it. And then this new piece of software will boot up, which is in and of itself kind of like an operating system.
A mini.
It's a little mini
drivers,
operating
like
system.
for your file system and stuff like that.
And it knows via configuration files what OSs you've got, where they're at on your hard drive or your many hard drives or what have you, and how to launch them. And then it either auto launches them or lets you through a menu select them, and that's what grub is.
So I was just checking.
Windows has the same thing, except you don't really see it very much.
NT bootloader, and you've probably seen the boot INI and things like that. Now, another one that's not nearly as popular, but I was just checking this old Linux Plus book here. And this is one of the things that you have to be careful with books. This is a little bit older of one, but you do want to watch out for this. Is this one talks about Lilo, which is an older Linux bootloader. Some still like
Lilo.
it. Yeah, it had some nice advantages. So Lilo is another example of something that's just a little tiny bit of code that then launches the operating system. So that's what a bootloader is, and that's why a bootloader has to be uploaded if you upgrade your kernel.
Updated, yeah.
Yeah, because the bootloader needs to know which kernel to go execute for you now.
Right. So that's why when a little app screws with it, it kind of pisses you off a little bit.
Lilo is still in development. DLP 211 points out in the chat room. It's still actively used by a lot of different, and also...
Well, this actually is more telling than that. The specific quote is, Lilo is still in development, or so I have heard.
Oh, yeah, no, it is. Lilo is big on hardware devices.
Yeah, it
like
is.
Little firewalls and stuff like that, or those, like your Wi-Fi routers that run Linux. A lot of them will use Lilo to execute their little boot environment.
But for the most part, desktop Linux users aren't using that anymore. They've moved on.
Yeah, and there are a lot of times when you're installing, you'll get prompted if you should install to a partition or an MBR. To be honest with you, I'm not really sure. I've had the least amount of problems with MBR installations. It just seems to be what the hardware and the other operating systems expect to have happen. Now we're going to kind of move on, kind of get into the bigger Linux stuff, and then we're going to have a couple of do's and don'ts. And I think we'll probably leave it towards that.
Okay.
I wanted to talk about what's the difference between an open source driver and a manufacturer's closed source driver.
Basically exactly what it sounds like. Closed source driver is a driver made by the manufacturer. So if NVIDIA comes out with a video card driver and they say, here you go, here's a video card driver, great. It may work awesome, but it's only going to work awesome on the systems that they tested it on and the systems that they support.
And the distributions and usually the licensing around that driver doesn't permit that it can be just automatically included with the distribution.
And here is part of the big problem. On the Linux side of things, drivers are not exactly cut and dry simple. In order to get some drivers functioning, you actually have to compile it into the kernel.
Mm-hmm.
So that's an issue. So which means, if you think about this for a second, that means that a specific version of a driver will oftentimes only work on a specific version of a kernel. So
you update your kernel for like a security patch, something
you go
like that.
to a new version of SUSE or Ubuntu. You're not going to a new version of Fedora, obviously, because you're not using that anymore. But if you go to a new version of one of the other systems that people are using,
you are so mean to them, dude.
you're gonna get a new version of the kernel, and it may not break. It may work great. You may just have to reinstall it. You may have to rerun an installer or repatch, but the chance of it breaking is much higher. Now, if it's open source, what that basically means is the community can maintain it. So theoretically, whoever's maintaining your repositories of software can keep that version of the driver up to date.
And generally, an open source driver can be included in the kernel so that the Linux kernel can automatically load it for you. There's sometimes, depending on how they had to develop the open source driver, in some cases, it has complete and total, and even in some other cases, better support for the hardware device than the manufacturer's driver, if they had a legitimate hardware spec to follow.
Right.
If they have to reverse engineer it, often in the case with like Wi-Fi drivers or video card drivers, there's sometimes some functionality that doesn't quite yet live up to expectations, like 3D acceleration, things like that.
For a long time, in order to get great 3D acceleration, you ended up having to use the closed source video drivers. I mean, that has changed a lot in the last year or so. But it's still kind
So
of
I
up
would
in the air
say for
sometimes.
like video and things like that, if your primary objective is gaming and 3D acceleration,
You're going to want the closed source drivers.
but if you just want,
It's sad, but it's true.
if you want an easy to maintain, easy to update, and probably have basic good compiz support for 3D accelerated window effects, your open source driver is probably going to get the job done. And if nothing else,
yeah.
try it and then uninstall it.
Yeah.
In fact, why don't we go from, while we're talking about installing and uninstalling, should we talk about what a package manager is and all that stuff? Because if you're coming from Windows, you just download a setup.exe and run it.
And honestly, this is one of the coolest parts about moving to Linux over being on Windows or OS 10. If you want to grab a piece of software on Windows or OS 10, you go to someone's website, you download it, and you either run an installer or on a Mac, you drag an application icon from a mounted disk image to a specific folder that Apple never tells you exactly where it's at and is actually kind of hard to find despite being fairly commonly named. Basically, Mac OS 10 is the stupidest user interface on the entire freaking planet for installing a new application. What was I talking about? Oh,
Well,
yeah,
yeah.
Apple sucks. All right, but what's really cool is if
Oh,
you
Brian.
have, on the Linux side of things, we have repositories and
Yeah.
we have packages. What a package is literally, think of it like an installer for your software.
Like an
Except-
instruction list with all the things it needs.
Right.
Like a grocery shopping
It's
list.
like a headless installer. So
Yeah.
it's an installer that can run itself once you tell it to run.
It's one unified software package that
Right.
controls all of the installing for your entire system. So you don't have setup.exes and the Windows MSI
Right.
files for every single program.
No,
you have one big program.
thing. And here's the great thing about them. The individual packages have references to what software they need to run.
Mm-hmm.
So if you've ever tried to install, let's say, a video editing tool under Windows, and you started to install
Oh
like
my
Adobe
goodness.
Premiere or something, you're like, you get through it and you run it and it doesn't quite work right. Oh, you have to install Apple QuickTime.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you got to install these other codecs. You don't necessarily know that until you start trolling through the documentation, is it doesn't do it for
Yeah,
you
yeah.
automatically. Or if you've ever installed stuff on Windows where an installer launches an installer,
Yeah, oh,
launches
yeah.
an installer,
Pigeon is a good example of that.
it's a nightmare. On the Linux side, it's just like, oh, you need these 12 other applications. Do you want to just install them all at the same time? So
Yeah, I can
everything
just go
works
get them right off the FTP site. It's no problem for me.
perfectly?
Yeah,
I'll
I'll
just
go
get them.
grab
I'll
those.
get
Yeah.
them for you. You don't even have to download them.
No.
I'll download them for you.
Yeah.
Do it right now.
I'll log it to
while
your
you're
database
waiting.
for you too while I'm at it. So that way you have a record there installed for
It's
you.
just super
Yeah,
handy.
yeah.
So that's what the packages are. The repositories literally it is an FTP site, but it is a web server sitting out
It's
there
an
somewhere.
index. It's a site with an index file on it, and different distributions do this differently, and different
Yeah.
distributions have different things in the repository.
But it's just a collection of software.
It's generally everything from the actual core files on your operating system, like your file manager and your login screen and all that kind of stuff.
to versions of Firefox and
Yeah.
OpenOffice and everything.
And a lot of distributions don't ship with things like audio codecs for MP3 files or video codecs.
But they're in there.
They're often in the repo.
So what's great is that all of the different distros provide some way of either graphically or via the command line searching the repository to find what you want. And you can of course search by the name of the packages or just search by what you're looking for, MP3 codec. And usually most of those distros will have default repositories where that'll be in the description. It'll give you a couple of options. You just click the one you want.
Yep.
Boom,
and then
you're
it
done.
keeps track of when there's an update available. So anything you've installed down the road, that same package manager will notify you when there's an update. And it's not just always security updates. There's sometimes new versions published in there, bug fixes, all kinds of
All
stuff.
sorts of stuff.
So you don't have to go out to the manufacturer. You don't have to go to Mozilla.org to download the latest Firefox. It just will automatically
You get the
do it.
latest and greatest whenever you
Yeah.
want it. It's awesome.
Well, once the distro puts it in their repo, but they're generally on
And
top
here's
of
the
that.
great thing. You don't have to wait for the distro. Let's say you're, newbie. You're noob Ubuntu user, and all the other Linux users are making fun of you. Like, you're noob Ubuntu user.
Noob.
I've moved on. I'm using Kubuntu 10.10.
I got Ubuntu.
alpha.
I like its low memory footprint.
Yeah, I like LXDE mostly because it only has 300 megabytes of.
I don't have a ton of money, so I only have 64
Who the
megabytes of
hell are we
RAM.
making fun of right now?
I don't know, dude. I don't know.
Because I honestly don't know anyone.
No.
I think what we were doing is we were like channeling Bill Murray making fun of nerds.
Yeah, and then like taking the most stereotypical things we could think of and just smashing it all together.
It didn't even make sense. All right. But if you move beyond and you want to that kind of newbie, just getting your feet wet stage.
I like that the chat room points out that we were being superior, like we've moved on to other things that we actually don't move on because we're still talking about. We actually use the like Ubuntu and stuff. We don't use Kubuntu. So we've moved on to these other things. We actually have not moved on in real life. Like, our smug attitudes are totally false.
I've got an OpenSUSE machine.
Oh yeah, OpenSUSE, sure.
Oh yeah.
So anyway,
So you can actually add in your own repositories. There's lots of community maintained repositories. You can build your own repositories.
That's a cool thing.
You can have all sorts of cool stuff set up that way. It's very handy. Lots of flexibility.
I'd like to talk about Linux, and I'm going to just let's peel this one last big topic off, and then we're going to talk about some places you can find help and some do's and don'ts. Ubuntu, boy, and that's a big problem actually. Is a lot of people just refer to Linux as Ubuntu or Fedora now, if that's the only they're familiar with. So you got to watch for that. There isn't Ubuntu specific Linux. Ubuntu or Fedora are repackagings of the core Linux files, like the kernel, the GNU tools, and then they repackage that with all the different applications. They brand it, they tweak it, and then they deliver it as their distribution, as Ubuntu or as Fedora or as OpenSUSE, etc. Now, it's Linux is it's two beasts really. There's a command line text version of Linux that you could live in your entire life if you didn't need graphical stuff, like a server. And then there's the graphical stuff that sits on top of that. And you have a window manager that lives in there, and you have a desktop environment that lives in there. So you have things like X11. That's your window manager. And that is what actually will display the graphical things on your screen. That's what communicates from what you want to actually run and what actually gets drawn through the video card to your monitor. Does that sound like that makes sense?
That's it.
You following me so far?
Yeah, I'm with you.
And then inside this X11 window manager...
Okay, wait. X11 isn't really a window manager.
Okay. It's a display manager, right?
Kinda,
and then it... Okay. So this is a really complicated thing to display. I'm trying to explain it in a way that people won't get totally lost. I don't know how to say it.
Newbie, 1,000-foot view. Linux by itself, let's say you just get Linux with all of the GNU tools. What you have is a command line system.
Right.
It's like DOS. If you come from DOS world, it's like DOS.
It's like DOS.
Okay, you want to use your mouse and you want to have a higher resolution with
and all the
maybe
distros
some
ship with
icons
it on.
and menus. What you get is X11.
And you don't really have to worry about this too much anymore. All the distros ship with the graphical on, but it's good to know the history of the beast in a way.
Now let's say now that you've got the ability to use your mouse, you want a little more functionality. You want fancy icons on your desktop and cool menus. Now you want to use things like GNOME and KDE to provide that extended functionality.
Yep, and so that's kind of where they'll sit on top of X11, and X11 they'll use X11 to display what they want to show you. And GNOME might be something that you're familiar with, or KDE might be something you're familiar with. Those are the big ones. There's a lot of other ones out there for Linux.
A lot of other ones.
And they use different software toolkits to be built. KDE and GNOME, because we're going to talk about the two big ones really.
Yeah.
And so you'll also hear that thrown around. There's Qt and there's GTK. So this is an extremely hard area for new Linux users to understand, because this whole graphical environment is a lot of terms. It's X11, it's GTK, it's Window Manager, it's Display Manager.
The reality, though,
you don't really need to worry about it too often.
You don't need to worry about it that often. Can we throw this up at all? Is this something we can throw up? Probably can't.
You want to zoom in
on it
Just
all.
do Control Plus on that, on like that. Yeah.
Whoop, there we go.
There you go.
All right. So here, what we've got here is too far. Zooming back.
Almost. There you go. You like that?
Oh, you undid it.
There you go.
We'll just leave it on there. Okay. All right. So what we've got here is actually a chart. This is mapping actual usage of GNOME versus KDE. So realistically, if you are a new user, those are your two options. Those are the two options you're probably going to use.
Yeah.
So what you've got here is most people are using GNOME. By a long shot, over 60% of all Linux users are using GNOME as their way to work with Linux. And a little bit less than 30% are using KDE. And then, there's a bunch of other ones. You see this yellow line there. That's a whole bunch of other ones. But it's just, it's just other ones. The reality is, if you're trying to get into Linux, you're trying to learn it, you're going to learn it on Ubuntu, which, here you go. There's right there, boom, that's Ubuntu user share. So what you've got up there is that blue line. This blue line is Ubuntu usage. This actually trends to almost 50% of all Linux users
Where's
out there
that
right
from?
now.
Is that
are
based
using
on
Ubuntu? This is using a combination of DistroWatch and Google Search Trends.
Yeah, that's right. And web traffic, right?
Yep. And the website analytics stuff. So you notice that green line up there is Debian. Ubuntu is based on Debian, so actually it's so Ubuntu is part of that green line. So most Debian
That's just
is
more.
Ubuntu.
Yeah.
But Ubuntu essentially makes up everything. I mean, it is half of the Linux world. So
And
if you
since
go out
Ubuntu
there,
ships with GNOME,
and if Ubuntu ships with GNOME by default, so therefore those are the two places you're going to start. That's unless you have friends that are like OpenSUSE KDE guys that you can go to for help. You're going to start with Ubuntu and GNOME.
and a lot of the and that's just the facts. And
That's
so
okay.
don't get
There's
so
nothing wrong with that.
Don't get so worked up in the fact that you don't fully understand how all of the different display managers and everything work. I realize a lot of you have felt that it's been an area that a lot of you have asked for clarification for.
Yeah.
And really, honestly, you can just hear as we walk through this beast that is X11 and the way it interacts with the different desktop environments. It really just gets to a point where you look at this and go, oh man, this is so screwed up. I just don't see Linux still using this in 5 years. To be honest with you, in my opinion, the whole X11 environment and all of that stuff is one of Linux's weaker areas. It's our soft spot.
Perhaps, but a new user doesn't have to worry about it.
Exactly.
You don't ever have to even think about it. You don't have to know it exists. You can ignore it entirely.
There go the books.
The books are gone.
I say throw out the, unless you're, I don't know, just throw them out.
Beginning SUSE book.
Yeah,
I'll keep that one. That's nice.
Keep that, right?
Yeah.
It features SUSE Linux 10.
That's right.
I don't know when this guy came out.
A while ago.
And a lot of
I think
these
3 years ago.
This
man.
one, which was cool, this one shipped with an actual SUSE CD.
Yeah.
So I got the
That's
distro
what
in
I'm
that
talking about.
All right, Brian. Now, a couple of quick places on where to get help. A lot of nerds that are into Linux like to hang out in IRC.
They really do. And if you've never really hung out in IRC, or you did 15 years ago, it's still around. Surprise, surprise.
Yeah.
So IRC is great. There's an IRC server called Freenode. It's just freenode.net, actually irc.freenode.net. Go download an IRC client. If you've got Pigeon, you've already got an IRC client.
Yeah.
You've got Empathy, you've got an IRC client.
I like XChat.
Yeah, there's lots of IRC clients. If you have Linux up and running, just type IRC into whatever software installation system there is, whether it's the App Center or Synaptic or whatnot, and you'll find plenty. You choose your own, rock and roll with it. Now, IRC is not a very reliable way to get help, but it's a way to connect directly with a lot of people that are actively using
Or
Linux.
if you're struggling, like, and almost every open source project out there uses IRC.
Yeah.
And especially the big ones like the distros and stuff like that. And if you go in there, you'll find somebody who can point you in the right direction where to get help.
They're
like they'll
pretty
give you
great.
the link to a wiki article or their forums and stuff like that. So if you've been doing your Google foo and you're just not ninjing it up today for whatever reason with your Google searches, they can probably point you in the right direction.
And if you're going to hop into a forum, I recommend hopping into the forums either one of two places. Hop into jupitercolony.com.
Yeah.
One, because we're Linux distro agnostic. The people in the Jupiter Colony are nice. They're cool people.
True.
Hey, they're listening to this show.
Yeah.
They're cool people.
Sure.
And they're generally nice, and they'll kind of help you out no matter what you're trying to run. The other thing is, if you're running a particular distro, if you're running Ubuntu, go to the official Ubuntu forums.
Yeah.
Do not get caught going to, random jimmybobstechforum.org or something like that, because you're going to get a bunch of people who are going to be a little more elitist,
Yeah.
a little bit more cranky, and a little less helpful. But if you go to the official forums, Ubuntu's or SUSE's, obviously not Red Hat's, but the other ones, you're going to get really good help.
Now I want to give a couple of do's and don'ts.
I like that you didn't even balk at my obviously not Red Hat that time.
No, I'm just
You're
going
just
with
used
it
to
now.
it. Yeah.
I figure.
Oh, this is what we do.
I figure it's now the show.
We do this now.
I don't know if I agree with it. I just want to go on the record. But
You notice I wasn't doing it last episode.
Yeah.
I'm probably not going to next. But
Yeah.
this one I would
I'm
like to be
rolling.
known
I'm
as
rolling with it, dude.
as the anti-Fedora episode.
I think it's just whenever you're sleepy, to be honest with you.
Is that it? When
Yeah.
I get sleepy, I'm like, man, I hate Fedora.
Yeah.
Man, Fedora made me tired today.
Yep.
The thing is, I haven't used Fedora in a while.
Yeah.
Your phone is ringing.
Yeah.
Your Google Android buzzing over there.
Yeah. My clients, you know how it goes.
You know what some people do? They put their phone into
know.
like an off mode or like a not ringy dingy mode.
To be honest with you,
prior to doing a show.
I thought
Who's gonna call you?
Who in their right mind would call me on a Sunday morning at 10 a.m.? Who would what kind of asshole would do that?
You just found out.
I just found out. Yeah.
Oh, good.
So one thing I want to mention is
All right.
don't switch over to Linux if there's something you really, really, really need that's Windows-based for your day job, like QuickBooks. You can get QuickBooks to run under Wine, and also fairly easy using a product called Crossover. But
can.
you're probably not really comfortable doing that kind of stuff yet.
And let's be honest, it's not going to run as well.
And
I mean,
there's alternatives like K-Money, and there's also the online site versions.
But if you've got 3 years of data in QuickBooks, getting it out of that and into some other format is not going to be an easy chore. Luckily,
there's VirtualBox.
If you're not, you
can
can
virtualize
virtualize a Windows
if you
OS.
know how to do that.
But at that point, you're really making sacrifices.
If you want to get your toe wet with Linux, maybe you should do the reverse. Maybe do VirtualBox under Windows for a little while to kind of see what
Linux,
works for you. Yeah.
And slowly transition over to using it more and more and more. A lot of people I know started out with having a dual boot system where they have Windows for their for their day job and maybe for some games, and then they had Linux for everything else. And then slowly they got all their games working under Linux.
I'll tell you one
thing.
thing.
They booted back into Windows less and less.
One thing
and
you want to
less
watch
as
out
they
for
went.
is the trap of, I just need to get this done. It's not working under Linux. Screw it. I'm going to reboot and go into Windows and get it done.
Yeah.
And then come back into Linux. Because what you'll find is you start saying to yourself, well, why do I really need to bother rebooting back into Linux? I'll just stay here where it works. So spend the time to work through the problem if you can. Or do something like maybe like your laptop is your news, internet, just basic email, chat, online games, stuff like that.
Get your stuff working.
And get that under Linux, and then keep your desktop Windows for a little while.
You know what's amazing is a lot of things, like let's say you want to get QuickBooks running under Linux. Well, it's a Windows app. At first, if you've never done this before, that seems daunting as hell. You're like, well, how the hell am I going to get this working?
Yeah.
And then you're like, oh, okay, you've heard about Wine. You've heard that Wine allows you to run Windows apps under Linux. So you go to their website. Doesn't really help you much.
No.
You look at it and you just glaze over.
So don't bet the farm on Wine.
But don't bet the farm on Wine. But what I'm saying is, it's actually not that hard.
You can make it work.
Ask a few questions.
And apps like
maybe,
Crossover.
Maybe a half hour, 45 minutes of work. You'll be up and running. You'll be rocking with your Windows apps under Linux. It's just, it takes a little bit. There is a hump to get over. Once you get over the hump, you're hump over.
Looks like Wine Doors is down. Wine Doors was a nice way to
Yeah, Wine Doors was a nice way to go.
So
It's up and down.
Check out Crossover Office. It's a good way to go.
Yeah,
too.
it's
just
a
costs
great
money.
way. Plus, they have good support. So if you have issues, you can contact the Crossover Office people, and they'll help you out.
And they have an honest rating of how an application works, and they have a known good database that comes with their application. So you can literally say, okay, I want to install Office 2007, and it'll say, all right, stick the disk in, or point me to a setup file, and then it just runs through this installer for you.
Yeah, it's really a great product.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, Brian. Did you have anything else you want to throw out there for the news?
No, I think that's good. I mean, obviously we're not going to do a noob episode all the time.
Yeah.
Because we've got a lot of stuff to talk about. There's a lot of Linux stuff happening in the world right now. Mm-hmm. But I think this was good. Hopefully this was helpful to everybody.
Yeah, I hope so.
Because hey, if nothing else, we kept them from running Fedora. So.
Or they're going to go check it out. What is he talking about? Fedora's download numbers probably go up every time we mention them.
Probably triple.
Now,
I don't think anyone uses it anymore.
If you have any noob questions or any noob suggestions, head over to JupiterColony.com, or also just any general feedback for the Linux Action Show. JupiterColony.com is the place to do that.
It's beautiful.
There you have it. All right. Oh, also, we've been doing these shows live, like I mentioned earlier in the show, and you can find out when we are actually going live, or maybe even what the topic's going to be about. Head over to Facebook.com/Jupiter Broadcasting. There you have it, everyone. Well, Brian, I think that's everything we have for this week's episode.
Are we just done?
I think so.
We don't even need to have a cap and then like an outro or anything.
I don't think so, because it's kind of been a one-off.
I love it.
I like it too. I like it when we change it up every now and then.
Dude, this is crazy.
You never know.
This really feels fresh and exciting.
We have a recipe for the show, but every now and then we break that mold.
We did, didn't we?
We did.
We just took that mold and we shattered it on the floor. Then we went out and we bought a new mold that's in the shape of that's in the shape of Optimus Prime.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna make a Jell-O.
Ooh.
Like Optimus Prime.
I like tasty Optimus.
It's gonna be in Optimus Prime colors. It's not gonna be perfect.
You can't really.
But it's gonna be close.
If you could just get the sections right.
It's gonna be
fine.
recognizable.
Yeah. You can eat the head first?
What are we talking about?
Optimus Prime.
Nice.
I know. Oh yeah.
Later,
Linux Action
everybody.
Show.
All right. We will see you next week.